Roll them.
I had written and told him that I liked black walnuts.
This is Grandpa Carson.
I wrote to
Alexander or Carson.
Yeah, and I wrote to both of them. I wrote quite often because Dwight never did write to his parents. And so that was before I met them. And so every Christmas after that, he'd send me a bag of cracked black walnuts. And they're hard to crack. Have you ever tried?
Very tough shells.
And they're hard to get the meat out. You have to pick it out. And he never failed to send them to me. And I understand when he was courting Grandma why he would have the servants get his buggy already all shined up.
A servant?
Oh, yeah.
So he was
a wealthy. His parents were wealthy.
His parents were quite well to do for oil money.
Oil money, huh?
Yeah,
oil
and
money.
also he used to go to Ireland almost every year to get fancy stock.
Scotland.
Scotland, yeah, to Scotland, and he bought stock to help make them have better stock in Kansas.
And what kind of animals?
Horses.
Horses.
Workhorses and mules.
What was that one with the big feet?
They had Clydesdales
Yeah,
and Morgans.
Clydesdales.
And was it Morgans? Clydesdales and Normans. Workhorses.
And Bob, I understand he also bought a
This is his
species-
father, John Carson, did this.
He had a species of sheep, too. That was his father, John Carson.
And he had peach orchards. He had a chicken house with glass windows, which was the talk of the state. He was quite well to do. They made their money in oil in Pennsylvania. The land that they had farmed had oil underneath it.
Oh.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
And
So they moved to Kansas, and they had this big fancy farm, and it eventually burned down. They lost everything, wasn't insured.
and there was poor in church mice after that.
And so now
And so
Alexander was raised rich, and then he was poor.
Yeah,
Right.
and the only schooling he had was to be a gentleman, but he was a bookkeeper, so he kept books for a while. And then when he couldn't find any job like that, why then he and his sons tried to farm. But I'll say this, when I went there, I never saw such poor farmers in my whole life. How they eked out a living, I'll never know. I think Grandma Carson kept them living. Your dad just hated chicken. That's the only meat they ever had, was chicken. And they said that she used to brag that she could go out and shoot a chicken with a .22 and have it on the table in an hour. And so anyway, I guess they had a real tough time of it. There was his brother Lamont, and what was the other one? Bob, and
Dwight and Leonard.
Dwight and Leonard. And they had one daughter, Mary Alice, and she died when she was 11 months old. They both had the whoopee cough. And Dwight and the sister were so sick, they thought that Dwight was the one that was going to die. But instead of that, she died, and they pulled him through. And I remember they tried to grow wheat, and they didn't know how to my way of thinking, because I've seen wheat farmers around Brigham, and I thought, no wonder they were so poor, because they just didn't know how, and they didn't have the means to buy the machinery they wanted and the seed, I guess. So, and I think she raised chickens and sold eggs. She worked real hard. She was a hard worker.
Now, was she married to them when they were poor? Then she never lived the rich life?
No, when they first were married, Dwight, that's when he was courting her, Dwight was fine. But then right after that is when everything burned down, they were wiped out. Okay. And so then it was pretty bad for them.
So what was she like? Was she from rich family too?
No, I don't think so. Do you, Bob?
Her father's name was Robert Getty.
Uh-huh.
And he was a farmer.
They had a large family. And I think she was the fifth daughter or something like that.
Something like that. They had like about 10 kids, I think.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And which one was the minister?
One of the guys that married one of those
married
girls.
to Maggie, I think her name was.
Yeah, his name was Renfrew something.
Yeah, and he was a minister. But when I went there, I'd been married, and Bob was 2 years old. Do you remember being there, Bob? And Bob was always ill when he was little. He had that stuff wrong with his stomach, and he was throwing up, and he couldn't eat this, and he couldn't eat that. And so every time we'd sit down to a meal, when he wouldn't eat, she'd say, well, eat that. Now, don't spill it. And so your dad would say, yeah, you eat it. And every time we sit down to a meal, that's what he got. And finally, I got so mad, I couldn't take it. So I grabbed him one day and went upstairs and laid up and cried because I said, so when Dwight came up, I said, listen, Dwight, what do you want that boy to do, starve to death? I said, when your mother gets after him, why don't you keep your mouth shut? I said, I'm going to leave. We're going to have to leave here because there's no way I'm going to let him suffer just because of you and your mother. He was astounded. He didn't realize he was doing it. And so while we were there, you know, she had a hard life. She didn't have a washing machine. She never had anything that made housekeeping easy. But she loved to cook. And she didn't have much to cook with. But after I'd been there, I used to send them money. And Grandpa Carson was so fond of fish. And they never did really get any fish, but he liked to get that salted herring. In buckets, he used to salt it, and then they'd boil it to take all the salt up and cook it. He was a cook. He liked to cook.
So Alexander was a good cook, or just liked to cook?
And I can remember him cooking liver for us when we were there. And I thought it was great. He did a great job. Liver and bacon.
What was his personality like?
Well, he was very quiet and calm. And no matter what she said, he didn't deny it. He just, okay, you know. He was very, I would say, kind of mousy. He didn't want to make any waves. But,
They were both good singers.
oh,
Dad's
yes.
cousin came up here and says they were both noted for being good singers.
Huh.
Both Alexander and his wife.
Yeah, and they used to sing together, didn't they?
Did they either of them play musical instruments at all?
Not to my
No,
knowledge.
the Reformed Presbyterians didn't believe in having musical instruments in their church.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
And they were Reformed Presbyterians.
I didn't know that.
Singing only.
So where did Grandpa Carson, Dwight, get his freckles from?
From his mother, I guess, because she had the red hair. When her hair was, when she had hair, she had real pale skin, and her hair was red, but it turned white real quickly. And I think that's where he got, you know, he had red hair when he had it before it turned white. And that's why I keep telling you I need a grandchild with red hair, but I guess I'm not going to get one.
Only if they turn to the bottle.
Yeah, but anyway, when we were there, I felt sorry, and I said to Dwight, we'll go downtown and buy some groceries. Because we stayed 2 weeks, I think. So we went and bought a whole bunch of groceries, and oh, she was so tickled, and she made this cake. And I can't remember what kind it was or anything, but do you remember, Bob? She held it on her lap like this as a meal, and then she'd say, do you want some cake? And I'd say yes, and she'd cut me a piece. And then she cut one for Dwight and one for her. And of course, Bob didn't get any. But then she'd have to say, oh, you don't need any, you're too fat already.
To her husband?
Yeah, and he was quite heavy. And I looked at her so funny, I said, well, you just better give her a piece. Give him a piece. I mean, she hated me. So, you know, they were very against drinking. And you know what Dwight and Leonard did? They went across the line and bought a bottle of wine. Leonard was home then. Bought a bottle of wine and brought it out, and they invited their dad to have a drink with them. And they both just had a stroke. They both had a stroke.
Quiet on the set, we're filming.
Getting some history here.
We're
Okay.
telling them about Grandma and Grandpa Carson. And
Have a seat.
that's about all I can remember.
You said, I didn't get on videotape when you said he wore spats everywhere.
Well, when he was courting
He
her.
was well off.
Yeah, when he's well off, he was dressed up to... You've seen pictures of him, haven't you?
No, I haven't.
Oh, he's the handsomest man you ever saw in your life. Wasn't he?
Yeah?
But somehow or other, when Mary Alice died, they quit the church. But I can't remember why, can you?
We never knew why. Grandpa Dwight Carson would never tell us. But they quit going to the Reformed Presbyterian Church, and they've been real stalwarts in that church.
And they went to the Covenanters.
No, that was Covenanters.
Oh, was it?
They went to United Presbyterian.
Oh.
And for some reason, all we can surmise is something was said or not said or done at that funeral.
But we never did find out. Dwight didn't seem to know either, did he?
I got the feeling that he knew, but he thought it was none of our business.
Oh, it could be. Well, when Leonard was here, we were all together one time, and I was telling him something, and he says, "You know, my folks never talked about anything." He says, "This is the best I've ever heard about them."
Was that right?
That's what he said. He said they never talked about the family at all. So Grandma Carson died first, and then Hugh, is that his name? The oldest boy?
Lamont.
Lamont, yeah, Lamont. Hugh Lamont.
No, Hugh.
Oh, Leonard is Hugh Leonard. But when Grandma Carson died, why, he was left alone, and Leonard was working truck driver. And he retired with 1 million miles or something. He had driven, and he was living with his dad, and his dad used to cook meals for him. And finally, he got real sick, and so then the wife, the widow of Lamont, she took him in, Grandpa Alexander, and she kept him in bed and nursed him and fed him, and he died like Dwight did, with bad kidneys. And I can remember when I saw Grandma Carson and she saw Bob, and she said, "Well, I have to tell you, Edna, that bad kidneys run in the Carson men, and they have to watch it."
Well, that's what got John Carson, too. That's what got the father of Alexander Carson, was kidney disease. They call it Bright's disease in those days.
Yeah, in those days they call it Bright's disease. But I felt real bad for her. In a way, I wasn't very fond of her, but when I think what a hard life she had, I felt bad. So when we lived at Seminole Dam, I said to Dwight, "We're going to buy a ticket for her, railroad ticket, and send her some clothes and invite her to come and visit us." Dwight said, "Okay, if you think that'll be all right." So I did. And it never occurred to me to invite both of them. Isn't that funny? And so I did, and she came, and we met her at Rollins, and the road to Seminole Dam was just horrible. Just like this, we climbed way up there. And so we waited in Rollins until it got dark. We had dinner there, and then we went up to the cabin. And she didn't see all this, because she'd never been in the mountains. Kansas is very flat, just a few rolling hills. And so we were there, and during the day, she and I get to talking. And when I was there at their home, there was a book in a bookcase. They had a lot of books in the bookcase. And one of them was Brigham Young's wife by his 27th wife. And that's all they knew about the Mormons. And so I thought to myself, no wonder they're so prejudiced,
Right.
And so, anyway, when she came, we got to talking about it one day. And I kept telling her, I said, "Well, I want to tell you something about the church." And I told her about my parents' ancestors coming across the plains and the things they did, and how the army was mean to them, and how they had to leave the temple they built and everything. And she said, "Well, that was pretty bad, wasn't it?" And I said, "Well, yes." And I said, "If you'd like to read the Book of Mormon, and we could read it together, well, I'd be glad." And she said, "Well, no, I think I've changed my mind about Mormons," she says. And I thought she was quite receptive to it. Come here, sit.
No, sit still.
No.